Are we live? I think we might be live. I hope so. Let's go with yes. And we're live. Good evening, everyone. I think we're going to be covering today's Brexit statement by Theresa May. Oh, I'm on the wrong tab anyway. Why don't I just go back over here for a minute? Or move the mouse onto the correct scene. Boom! Sorry, I should have prepped that properly, but never mind. Today, I didn't know that Theresa May was giving a Brexit statement. I didn't know, so I hadn't originally planned on covering this. But then I caught it at the best moment ever. When I found out it was on, I went to YouTube, found UK Parliament channel was streaming, and when I clicked it, it was at the most... it's just such a... It's why Ian Blackford is on the thumbnail. Why the paper fiddler is front and centre. Not because he's the liar. So to an extent, there is an argument that could be made about him... maybe it's a bit clickbaity, implying he's a liar. No, he calls someone a liar. And we will certainly get to that soon enough. As the week has progressed from last, I've been paying close attention to what Theresa May has been doing. Her attempts were for the withdrawal agreement to be reopened so that the backstop could be legally removed. A legal reassurance, that it wouldn't be a permanent thing. Because this is now, we know, the votes she could get in. If it is removed, she will be able to get her deal through Parliament. That is the only concession she wants made. And it's quite astonishing to see her be stonewalled. It is a power play. It's like a game of chicken, or gay chicken if you're into that. It's the first person to blink, that kind of thing. As we're, less than 50 days, or just over 50 days perhaps, from this D-Day. We are getting to a point now where someone has to blink. Someone has to say chicken. And many media outlets in this country think Theresa will, because there are more options on the table for her than there are for the EU, in the sense that the EU only has one option, or two. Either they reject the deal, reject reopening, no deal is agreed upon, or not that that is in itself agreed upon, it's a case that no deal occurs, therefore nothing happens, we leave, no deal, and we're both affected. Or the EU caves at the last minute and removes the backstop. A backstop that has existed since December of 2017, when it was agreed upon in the joint agreement. Which, in hindsight, had we known about this sooner, which I could agree in the context of a Privy Council, perhaps, if MPs, because they should have been made aware, those within the Privy Council, that way they could argue certain pros and cons of that without it being public, which I think is very important. Perhaps that was, at the time, a worthwhile discussion to have sooner, because the government acted poorly, with a certain air of arrogance. But then again, it was well earned. They were the government in power, so they can be as arrogant as they want, because it doesn't really matter, because they shouldn't have to count out other parties. But now, because of, not just because of that, but because of failings in domestic policy, Theresa May has become weaker and weaker and weaker, to the point where she is now well and truly screwed. She has to get cross-party consensus to get the bill or her agreement through. Her deal hinges on her getting additional votes, and the only way she'll get it is by getting some people to blink first. Her options, because obviously their two EUs are pretty obvious. Theresa May's is to run the clock out, which I'm starting to think she's now trying to do. But I think she's trying to run it down to force their hand, and not because she wants no deal. Because I don't think anyone wants no deal, in Parliament anyway. Unless you are basing it on the binary option of the deal on the table or no deal. If you are ignoring that and considering other options are non-binary, then yeah, perhaps there are options. So she's trying to run the clock down. That's an option. Other options that people are trying to find ways to get through include a second referendum, which would take at least a year to organise, which would mean an extension to Article 50, which the EU themselves have said will not happen. This point has been restated many, many times, and the reason it keeps getting restated is because people keep ignoring it, thinking they can now, if they're in power or if another general election is called, they could renegotiate a comprehensive deal like the Norway option, which would be a bit of a smack in the face to those that voted leave, the majority of which voted leave for controlled immigration. And the Norway deal actually, while it gives Norway access to the single market and customs union, in return for that, they have free movement. People can go there freely. That is not. Oh, I think there's something affected in the common fisheries policy as well. That to me is not a good deal, because we are not giving, we're not having, or we're not retaining control over things that should be fundamentally ours. We voted leave, and before anyone says it, yes, we didn't vote the terms, but I'd find it, you'd be, actually, you know what, those that say that would be hard-pressed to explain how leave works in a way that would actually mean leaving the EU without them then saying, oh, well, we should just stay a part of this, and this. Oh, and I'm going to say this now before I press play on that video that we're going to look at, to the inevitable retard who's going to comment after this stream. And they're going to say this. They're going to say, can you please stop pausing to respond to things? It's hard to hear what they're trying to say with your stupid shit getting in the way. I have linked below the original stream. By all means, go there and watch that. Unfortunately, the chat was disabled for that, which is a bit of a shame really, because I would have loved to have seen the live stream chat, which has featured a few times in the past on the UK Parliament channel. Hopefully they'll... I'm hoping, actually, they'll monetize that channel, because then they can use the money to start paying for the renovations they keep putting off for Parliament. Either that or just, you know, build one out of Lego outside or something. I don't know. Excuse me. Other options for Theresa May would include don't do that. Revoking Article 50 and thereby staying in the EU and negating or ignoring the result, because it was never a legally binding result. That's the interesting point of the original referendum. It was never legally binding. The government was under, at the time especially, had no legal obligation to enact the will of the people. That, however, may have been career suicide if they did that. And that would have been career suicide for any involved, David Cameron at the time being the main culprit. And I do apologise for the coughs and random inner burp sound. A cuck stream. Nice. Excuse me. We're not having that for an hour. Another option, so revoking second referendum, would be the extension to Article 50, since I mentioned, which I've already mentioned, sorry, and quite frankly, that's not going to go anywhere, because that has to be agreed upon by the EU as well. I don't have the flu, Davey. It's just a dry cough, which is really pissing me off. I do apologise. 1 second. Right. Yes, Mother, I will get some water. Yes, so we are going to dive into this. I should have put it at the point where I'm not sick, Mandy. I would have put this at the point where Theresa May started speaking, but I actually forgot to do that. So let's go. Oh, right, actually, yeah, okay. So this moron speaking is actually just before Theresa May, anyway. So, right, I think that's it. Yeah. Right.
On the government's ongoing work to secure a Brexit deal that honours our commitments to the people of Northern Ireland, commands the support of Parliament and
enough votes in Parliament, to be clear.
Can be negotiated with the EU.
But they won't negotiate, so... Yeah. What is that thing she's wearing around her neck? Does anyone know what that is? Because I genuinely don't know. And if you in the chat, because I want to get you involved, if you think Theresa May is trying to run down the clock now instead of actually trying to achieve anything, press 1. Because I'm starting to believe she is. Anal beads. Well, I've seen... Yeah. You know what? That reminds me of American Pie... Is it 3? Oh, 1s. Yes. The skulls of her victims. I thought they were cultural appropriation from somewhere, but never mind.
On the 29th of January, this House gave me a clear mandate and sent an unequivocal message to the European Union. Last week, I took that message to Brussels.
You didn't need to take that message to Brussels. Because honestly, the EU was watching, and they were busy laughing their tits off. Because they know they don't have to do shit. Because they know they have all the power. Which is quite embarrassing, really, isn't it?
I met President Juncker, President Tusk, and the President of the European Parliament, and
3 presidents, fuck's sake.
Antonio Tajani, and I told them clearly what Parliament wanted in order to unite behind a withdrawal agreement.
This is actually important, because it was said, Juncker himself, or Juncker, said he didn't know what Parliament stood for. And then on the same day, Parliament voted on the amendments they wanted, and Sir Graham Brady's was the one that was about the backstop, and it was voted in favour of, removing the backstop. So he knows what they want. Remove the backstop. If you, Juncker, want the deal, then you're going to have to remove the backstop. If you are trying to... And it is power play. That's what this is now. If you want a no deal, which hurts you quite a bit and hurts us quite a bit too, then just let the clock run out, I guess. I would point out now, though, with the meaningful vote on the Plan B, meant to have happened Thursday, I think, or Friday, but it's not. It's been postponed until possibly near the end of this month. You have to be a tiny bit worried, because that means there's less than a month to ratify, legislate and enact all the bills that need to be dealt with. Less than a month to get it all done, so we leave on the 20-whatever of March.
Namely, legally binding changes to the backstop. And I explained to them the 3 ways in which this could...
Thank you, Socky.
Buy some medication for your tentacle aids.
I will pick it up in the morning.
...be achieved. First, the backstop could be replaced with alternative arrangements to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland.
Thank you for the correct date.
Yesterday, my Right Honourable friend, the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, met with Michel Barnier to discuss the ideas put forward by the Alternative Arrangements Working Group, comprised of a number of my Honourable and Right Honourable friends. I'm grateful to that group for their work, and we are continuing to explore their ideas. Secondly, there could be a legally binding time limit to the existing backstop. Or third, the...
Accidentally muted myself. The comment about the Fisher Price. That's genius.
There could be a legally binding unilateral exit clause to that backstop. Given both sides agree we do not ever want to use the backstop, and that if we did it would be temporary, we believe it is reasonable to ask for legally binding changes to this effect.
But the EU is under they have no reason to make it permanent, or to introduce legally binding text that would make it not permanent. Therefore, you've given up all the power. They can just make you bend over and insert those Fisher-Price anal beads. Excuse me. Those Fisher-Price anal beads, and that what looks like it might be a cock ring on your jacket there. I know it's not being used correctly if it's being inserted, but what the hell?
Mr. Speaker, as expected, President Juncker maintained the EU's position that they will not reopen the withdrawal agreement.
Imagine my shock.
And I set out the UK's position, strengthened by the mandate that this House gave me, that this House needs to see legally binding changes to the backstop, and that can be achieved by changes to the withdrawal agreement.
Agreement which you agreed to back in December of 2017. Oh, UK should go fuck it and land troops in Brussels. You know what? It's not a bad idea. Just saying. And thank you for the donation. Are cats gay?
We both agreed that our team should hold further talks to find a way forward, and he and I will meet again before the end of February to take stock of those discussions. So our work continues. The Secretary of State and the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster are today in Strasbourg, and last week the Attorney General was in Dublin to meet his Irish counterpart. And following my own visits to Brussels, Northern Ireland and Ireland last week, I welcomed the Prime Minister of Malta to Downing Street yesterday, and I will be speaking to other EU27 leaders today and throughout the week.
I'd love to see how you're going to try and convince member states to agree to reopen it. Now, granted, you only really need one of those states to do it. You only need one, because all 27 members have to agree on the deal. If one doesn't, then they will either, more than likely, they will be sanctioned and bullied by the EU into agreeing it anyway. However, the last two that complained were France and Spain. France is essentially getting what it wants by having access to our waters, and Spain wants sovereignty over Gibraltar, a country which has belonged to us longer than Spain has even been a country. And Spain's not even a country at all anyway. Seriously. Not a country. Fuck you.
The Right Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, shares the concerns of this House on the backstop.
But he's a massive snake. He introduced his plan, which, by the way, wasn't exactly... Okay. It was... I've read it. Well, parts of it. It's not exactly specific. It's... I would use the word nebulous. The EU has been given too much power by May. Yes, and that was a point made by... Oh, I have to get the right guy. There are two Skinners I've heard of. One's Frank Skinner, the other one's Dennis Skinner. I think Frank Skinner's the comedian. No, Dennis Skinner? Dennis Skinner's the MP. He stood up and said, "You've given the EU too much power." And he was right. I will actually... You know what? Because fuck it. I'm going to come back here for a second. And I'm going to go and get... I'm going to get the clip because it is apt. Okay, is this it? Lol. Okay, I think I found it. Here we go.
Mr. Dennis Skinner.
Russia Today.
Doesn't the Prime Minister realise that she's handed over power not to people in this House, but she's handed over power to the people that she's going to negotiate with over there in Europe? She looks very weak, and she is. The power that they want is to be able to demonstrate to every other country that might be thinking about getting out of the EU that she's handed over them the power to be able to demonstrate that that's what Britain is doing. The British Prime Minister now doesn't know whether she's on this earth or Fuller's because of the action she's taken. Mrs. Thatcher had a word for it. What she's done today, F-R-I-T, she's frit.
Basically, it's another word for frightened. And yes, Dennis Skinner does look tired, but he's about 80-something. He's really old, but he loves his job. And he's right. She handed over all the power and negotiating power to the EU. If you wanted us to be taken seriously, we don't go to them and say, yeah, we're going to negotiate with you. No. You negotiate with us, motherfucker. I honestly believed a deal could have been agreed upon, but part of me wishes now that, simply put, she should have sat there in Parliament with her feet up on the dispatch box, with her phone on the side, and a big clock on the thing saying how long until, with a sign that says how long until Junker finally blinks. You fucking drunk cunt. So yeah, he was right, Skinner was.
I welcome his willingness to sit down and talk to me, and I look forward to continuing our discussions.
Even though he wants a Norway-style deal which keeps us in the single market and customs union, because leaving means remain, everyone. That's what it really means.
Indeed, government ministers will be meeting with members of his team tomorrow. I think there are a number of areas where the whole House should be able to come together.
They did, when they rejected your deal.
In particular, I believe we have a shared determination across this House not to allow the UK leaving the EU to mean any lowering of standards in relation to workers' rights, environmental protections or health and safety.
All of which I can agree upon, which is why I think we should introduce them, if their standards are higher than our own, we should introduce it into our law, which I'm sure, if you don't get that dickhead from the Conservative Party who objects to every bill regardless so it doesn't get put forward and it takes forever to get through, if you put those bills up to be debated and then legislated, I'm sure that could be agreed upon. Although there's a bit of an oxymoron in when she, a Conservative, mentioned workers' rights. They're not they don't have a good track record of it, okay?
I have met trade unions and with members from across the House, and my right honourable friend, the Business Secretary, is leading work to ensure that we fully address all concerns about these vital issues. We've already made legally binding commitments to no regression in these areas if we were to enter the backstop, and we're prepared to consider legislating to...
No regression. Interesting. So we do what they tell us?
give these commitments force in UK law. And in the interests of building support across the House, we're also prepared to commit to asking Parliament whether it wishes to follow suit whenever the EU changes its standards in these areas.
I'm not a fan of that. I don't think we should constantly have to change our rules for something else that we're not a member of. That is ridiculous. And it was in the deal when it was brought forward. It was a huge glaring statement of, okay, you guys decide the terms, we'll just match you. We'll just match you, you know? It's like when you buy a computer from somewhere else, but you know you can get it cheaper somewhere else, and then they'll reduce their price to match them. No. That's not how you make a profit. And why the fuck should we have to keep changing our standards? Because they keep changing their standards, but we're not subject to their rules. But because of your deal, we would still be, but have no say over it. At that point, we may as well just stay in the EU. At least then our 1 in 27th voice would be heard. It would be summarily rejected, as is usually the case with our MEPs. We have been voted down, I think, nearly every single time we have tried to get something through the European Parliament. Democracy, all well and good, but British interests and everything. I'd rather take my interests as a country before the continent. No offence to the rest of you. Except for Spain. You're not a country. Fuck you. Oh, and Guernsey. Fuck you, Guernsey.
And of course, we don't need to automatically follow EU standards in order to lead the way.
But if we don't do as they tell us, then we are punished for it. We are sanctioned in some way by a committee that has yet to be decided upon by other people who will then decide what they do to us as punishment for not adhering to their rules. It sounds like an EU state, doesn't it? If you don't do as you're told, you are sanctioned by unelected fuckheads.
As we have done in the past under both Conservative and Labour governments. The UK has a proud tradition of leading the way in workers' rights.
LOL. The UK has a proud tradition of leading the way in workers' rights, whilst maintaining a flexible labour market that has helped deliver an employment rate almost 6 percentage points above the EU average. Yeah, fuck you, EU. Get good, scrub. Get more zero-hour contracts, bitches. Successive governments of all parties have put in place standards that exceed the minimum set by the EU. Well, at least we don't have to change on that, I guess. Purge the filthy heretics in holy radioactive fire. 2020, everyone, no lives matter. A Labour government gave British workers annual leave and paid maternity leave entitlements, well above that required by the European Union. A Conservative-led government went further than the EU by giving all employees the right to request flexible working. Yeah, but, you know, it's all good having the right to flexible working, but employers are quite target-driven now, so KPIs or key performance indicators are quite important. You've got to hit target, and that includes sales, certain sales, not like supermarkets. They're just guaranteed sales at this point, unless you're M&S or Waitrose. But yeah, vote for me. But the right to request doesn't work on lower income people. It doesn't work because employers know they can just get rid of you and get somebody else that will be more flexible, in that they will be around, you know, more often to do work. And Princess Crazy Locks, it's quite alright to be late. You haven't missed much. I still haven't gotten to Jeremy Corbyn's response or Ian Blackford's moment of glory. And no, Carlos, I have not seen a sexy May. If you DM it to me, I will put it on the screen for all to see. And I was proud to be the Minister for Women and Equalities to introduce shared parental leave so that both parents are able to take on caring responsibilities for their child, something no EU regulation provides for. Oh, thank you very much for the donation. Does the necklace signal Theresa is a crab person? No, but she probably does have crabs. The share parental thing, I actually am fully on board with. That's fine. I don't remember whether Labour supported it initially. I do wish more people took parental rights seriously and leave and such. But other countries have yet to catch up that men actually exist and have parental rights. They've yet to catch up. Although, not that we're that far ahead. You know, what with the majority of kids still going to mothers, even though quite a lot of them are abusers. Yeah, statistics are pretty fucking damning, I'm just going to say that. Let me find it on Twitter. Good, find it. When it comes to workers' rights, this Parliament has set a higher standard before, and I believe will do so in the future. Indeed, we already have plans to repeal the so-called Swedish derogation, which allows employers to pay their agency workers less, and we're committed to enforce... Yeah, I kind of support that. I know that, because I used to work for an agency long ago, it cost the employer double, more than double, just to hire me, and I was minimum wage, and it was like the guys in the agency were getting about £9 an hour to my £6 an hour, and I thought, is it really worth that? Because everyone else that was doing my same job was earning about £9 to £10 an hour. So I kind of I get it. Especially I was an engineer, and it was quite a high skilled job and low paid. That £4 an hour difference was huge, by the way. You're doing 40 hours a week, and you're going home with about maybe 200-ish, and people going home with a few hundred more than you. It was just an insult. Well, not after tax, not even 200. But yes, you know what I mean.
Forcing holiday pay for the most vulnerable workers. Not just protecting workers' rights, but extending them. As I set out in my statement 2 weeks ago, the House also agrees that Parliament must have a much...
I was pimped. Thanks, Vent. That support, fam, means the world to me. Oh, and I'm now going to mention this. If you don't like YouTube, this is also being streamed on Stream Me. It is linked below. I'm just going to mention it now because fuck it.
Stronger and clearer role in the next phase of the negotiations.
Lol, negotiations. You mean you turn round, take the necklace off, bend over, present them to the 3 presidents, who will each take it in turn to insert one of those stones up your ass until you give them what they want. 'Cause you're a good little girl that always wants to please drunk daddy, even if he is shorter than you.
Because the political declaration cannot be legally binding, and in some areas provides for a spectrum of outcomes, some members are understandably concerned that they cannot be sure precisely what future relationship it would lead to. By following through on our commitments and giving Parliament that bigger say in the mandate for the next phase, we are determined to address those concerns. The Secretary of State has written to all members of the Exiting the EU Committee, seeking their view on engaging Parliament in this next phase of negotiations. And we're also...
I assume the next phase of negotiations, to be clear, is a direct reference to a deal being agreed upon, and then the implementation period. That being when the negotiations on the deal that is now agreed upon being more specific. Which, by the way, we're going to get fucking flayed if it is that. Oh, you've put something in the chat, have you, Carlos? Okay, hang on. I need to actually go back here a second, because I can't open something in case you've sent porn and I haven't realised. Okay. Hang on. Can I open that image another... That'll work. Oh, that's not good. Zoom out. Here we go. Sorry about that. It's not ideal. What about here? Aha! There you go, everyone. Sorry about the chat and everything. But yeah, this is the... That is quite... Look at that cleavage! I didn't know her tits did that. I didn't notice. Let me go back. I'm not going back. Screw that. Amazing. That is... She doesn't have brown hair. She's got grey hair. And she doesn't have pearls. She has anal beads. Dude. What's going on here? Oh, people should go check that picture out. That's amazing. I'm going to retweet that. Give me a sec. Wow. Next catfish, fantastic.
Reaching out beyond this House to engage more deeply with businesses, civil society and trade unions.
Yay.
Everyone in this House knows that the vote for Brexit was not just about changing our relationship with the EU, but changing how things work at home.
It was about changing our relationship with the EU by simply not having one. Because we, like Dennis Skinner himself had said, we had given up so much power to the EU. We had no voice, no power, no strength, no influence. Constantly being voted down. We were being beaten the fuck out of the European Parliament. It's humiliating. Now you have options. If you had been consistent, much like with the chemical weapons Syrian airstrike you did, which, by the way, proved absolute jack shit. In fact, there were no weapons at all, you fucking idiot. Because you got vetoed by Russia. Maybe you should have airstruck Brussels. You know, that's consistent at least with your mentality of, oh, I don't get what I want. Let's just airstrike it.
especially for those in communities who feel they have been left behind.
So, England, then. Oh, and Wales.
Addressing this and widening opportunities is the mission of this government that I set out on my first day as Prime Minister.
To the chat over on StreamMe, very funny. Oh, she'll have a pearl necklace when Omegon gets done with her. And Serene, I think that was a picture of a sexified Theresa May.
And I will continue to work with members across the House to do everything we can to help build a country that works for everyone. But, Mr. Speaker, one area where the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, and I do not agree is on his suggestion that the UK should remain a member of the EU Customs Union. I would gently point out that the House of Commons has already voted against this.
Also, the EU has outright stated you cannot cherry-pick. I have said this so many times. I don't know what it is about these MPs that think they are somehow better. They think they are able to do what has already been said that cannot be done. Honestly, it's embarrassing. You feel ill. I'm sorry. Smack that peach, that's right.
And in any case...
A lot of noise and heckling, but the record shows that everyone gets a chance to question the Prime Minister. I think it is right that she should have a proper and respectful hearing, and the same courtesy must be extended to the Leader of the Opposition in due course, the Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, as I say, I would gently point out that the House of Commons has already voted against this. And in any case, membership of the Customs Union would be a less desirable outcome than that which is provided for in the political declaration. That would deliver no tariffs, fees, charges or quantitative restrictions across all sectors and no checks on rules of origin. But crucially, it would also provide for the development of an independent trade policy for the UK that would allow us to strike our own trade deals around the world, something that the Labour Party once supported.
Yeah, somehow many are now totally against this to the point where it just feels like they're just voting against just cause. And that mentality has existed for a long time. We're not the same party as you, so we just don't like you. I think it's a terrible mentality to have. I think if you're going to go into politics treating everyone you disagree with as the enemy, then you're setting yourself up to be a grumpy loser. And the emojis, fucking hell.
On Thursday, as I promised in the House last month, we will bring forward an amendable motion. This will seek to reaffirm the support of the House for the amended motion from the 29th of January, namely to support the government in seeking changes to the backstop and to recognise that negotiations are ongoing. Having secured an agreement with the European Union for further talks, we now...
Even though they've said they won't reopen the agreement.
...need some time to complete that process.
Lol. This is the part where many articles in the news have covered this as stating, or as saying, that she is trying now, she's begging for more time, which is why the meaningful vote, the second meaningful vote, won't happen yet, because she needs more time to convince them, the EU that is, to reopen the agreement so that we can get that backstop, that pesky little backstop removed. And probably replaced with ad block for everyone.
When we achieve the progress we need, we will bring forward another meaningful vote. But if the government has not secured a majority in this House in favour of a withdrawal agreement and a political declaration, then the government will on Tuesday the 26th of February make a statement and table an amendable motion relating to the statement, and a minister will move that motion on Wednesday the 27th of February, thereby enabling the House to vote on it and on any amendments to it on that day. Mr. Speaker, as well as making clear what is needed to change in the withdrawal agreement, the House has also reconfirmed its view that it does not want to leave the EU without a deal. The government agrees, but opposing the deal is not enough to stop it. We must agree... opposing no deal is not enough to stop it. We must agree a deal that this House can support.
Or enough people in the House can support. Sorry, chat distracted me. Completely lost my train of thought. But yes, she doesn't have to get the support of the House in the sense of all the House. Just enough votes. And to the lovely, lovely person over on stream.me, I could do editing streams. That could be fun. I may start doing that in the future. Yes.
And that is what I am working to achieve. I've spoken before about the damage that would be done to public faith in our democracy if this House were to ignore the result of the 2016 referendum.
But the votes of the Scottish people, their voice is being ignored. And but people didn't know what they were voting for, and but if people had another chance they might vote again a different way, but it doesn't matter. Shut the fuck up and get on with it. If you don't enact Article 50, if you don't go through with this, if we don't leave, you smack 17.4 million people around the face. Your jobs, all 600 plus of you, are forfeit, because you will no longer be fit to govern. And there will be riots. Not like the yellow jacket ones in France. These ones would tear that building down. That's not a threat either. You know it will happen. People will destroy that building because it's supposed to stand for democracy, and the one thing you wouldn't do at that point is enact the will of the people when you gave them a chance to speak. And because you didn't like it, you voted and then decided, you know what? Fuck you all.
In Northern Ireland last week, I heard again the importance of securing a withdrawal agreement that works for all the people of this United Kingdom. In Belfast, I met not just with politicians, but with leaders of civil society and businesses from across the community.
Did you get a pint of Guinness, though?
Following this House's rejection of the withdrawal agreement, many people in Northern Ireland are worried about what the current uncertainty will mean for them. In this House, we often focus on the practical challenges posed by the border in Northern Ireland. But for many people in Northern Ireland, what looms larger is the fear that the seamless border between Ireland and Northern Ireland that helped make the progress which has followed the Belfast Agreement possible might be disrupted.
You know what would really make it a lot easier? If, you really want to preserve the peace? A giant fucking wall with turrets. You're not going to have to worry about the whole Good Friday Agreement, because now they can't see or talk to each other. What you want to do is build that wall all the way around Northern Ireland and put some of it in the sea as well, just so no one can swim around it. And we'll call Northern Ireland Mega Mini City 1.
We must not let that happen, and we shall not let that happen. The talks are at a crucial stage, and we now all need to hold our nerve to get the changes this House requires and deliver Brexit on time.
Oh, so it is a game of chicken.
By getting the changes we need to the backstop, by protecting and enhancing workers' rights and environmental protections, and by enhancing the role of Parliament in the next phase of negotiations, I believe we can reach a deal that this House can support. We can deliver for the people and the communities that voted for change 2.5 years ago and whose voices for too long have not been heard.
England and Wales, mostly. We're ignoring the countries of Scotland, Northern Ireland and London.
We can honour the result of the referendum, and we can set this country on course for the bright future that every part of this United Kingdom deserves. That is this government's mission. We shall not stint in our efforts to fulfil it, and I commend this statement to the House.
That took longer than expected, but oh well. It was pretty empty, as always. I'm going to let Jeremy Corbyn speak most of his. I don't think it's as long. He does at least get one really good slide dig in, and I'm actually okay with it, so we're going to let that play out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I usually thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of her statement, but it was handed to me just as I was leaving my office to come down here, so I can only assume she entrusted it to the Transport Secretary to deliver it to me.
Yeah, you got to admit that's pretty piss poor. Usually you get at least an hour to prep and read it and make sure you got some decent points. Going from that office to here, not enough prep time. Pretty disgusting, actually.
Mr. Speaker, our country is facing the biggest crisis in a generation, and yet the Prime Minister continues to recklessly run down the clock. We were promised there would be a deal last October. It didn't happen. We were promised a meaningful vote on a deal in December. It didn't happen. We were told to prepare for a further meaningful vote this week after the Prime Minister again promised to secure significant and legally binding changes to the backstop.
None of which have happened.
And that hasn't happened.
Yep.
Now the Prime Minister comes before the House with more excuses and more delays. In her statement, the Prime Minister has failed to answer even the most basic questions. What progress has she made on identifying and working up the alternative arrangements?
Oh, you mean the unilateral mechanism thing?
Have they been presented to the European Union? If not, when will they be presented? And will she set them out before this House and ask for its approval of them? In truth, Mr. Speaker, it appears the Prime Minister has just one real tactic: to run down the clock, hoping members of this House are blackmailed into supporting a deeply flawed deal.
It does sound more plausible, because as there's less time, you are, reasonably speaking, putting more pressure on the MPs to make a decision, to accept a really bad deal, or to go no deal. And this binary is only predicated on the assumption that the MP in question, and a lot of them don't think in that binary sense, that there are other options. So it's predicated on the assumption that those are the only ones, but there are many that actually believe otherwise. Yeah.
This, Mr. Speaker, is an irresponsible act. She's playing for time and playing with people's jobs, our economic security and the future of our industries. Yesterday, growth figures show the lowest growth since 2012, our manufacturing sector mired into recession.
The whole economic growth thing, worst economic growth, but still growth. Normally the first quarter of any year is the worst for growth. So it's not something to complain about just yet. It's not a recession because it's not a trend of lower than expected growth. It's a case of the first quarter not great.
Decision by Nissan last week to pull its investment from the Sunderland plant,
which is not entirely true. Jobs will still be safe.
May only be the thin end of a very long wedge.
Speculation is the mother of all fucked up choices.
Uncertainty and failing confidence in this government to deliver are putting jobs at risk.
Well, that's because we voted leave, and there is a consequence to that. Why do you have to blame the government for that? Okay, actually, you can blame them for fucking up the negotiations, but we voted to leave. That's the fact. The only way you could avoid this is by staying in the EU. Hello, Brit Gamer Girl. You probably could just @ Omegon in the chat, because I'm not on the Cthulhu-Kin and Friends Show account. I'm on the Omegon one, so @ing Omegon, I'll at least see it normally. Yeah.
The Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Business Secretary will be hearing the same warnings as I am, that several major large manufacturers, household names employing tens of thousands of people, are poised to follow in Nissan's footsteps.
Lol.
Earlier today, we heard from the Leader of the House that the next meaningful vote may not happen until after the EU summit on the 21st of March, just days before Brexit is due to happen. If, Mr. Speaker, this is not the case, can the Prime Minister tell the House today when the meaningful vote will be?
It would be nice to have a specific date, because this lingering is, yeah, not helping. By the way, does that not, this little wheel thing, it reminds me of one of those Wheel of Fortune things, where or has a each colour has like a dare on it or something, or maybe it's a twister. Is she going to play Anal Bead Twister?
We also learned from the Leader of the House that any...
Oh, sorry, and are not all votes meaningful? No. In Parliament, amendments can be voted on, some of which the government doesn't have to enact, and some are based on things that have to be enacted. It depends on... Hello, Peter. It depends on the... And Echo, who spelled my name wrong. It depends on what it is they're voting on and whether or not they are legally binding or not. And that is usually debated upon.
Changes to the backstop won't be written into the legally binding withdrawal agreement. Can the Prime Minister confirm that? Is the Prime Minister really prepared to risk people's livelihoods, jobs and investment in a desperate attempt to push a deeply flawed deal through Parliament? The Prime Minister has just told members of this House to hold their nerve. Tell that to Nissan workers in Sunderland and the thousands more worried about their job security and the future of their communities.
I'm sure they were worried about their jobs without leaving the EU, to be honest, because, you know, the Conservatives and, you know, job worker rights.
Mr. Speaker, no minister serious about protecting jobs in this country would allow a Prime Minister to deliberately run down the clock and play chicken with people's livelihoods. To stand by and do nothing would be a complete dereliction of duty.
I want to raise a point. And yes, the twat is using the getting power to fuck us over. When the government wasn't giving up its negotiating strategy, because it shouldn't during the negotiating period, he wanted it all laid out in the open. Now, we are stuck in a position where we have to do nothing. We are playing chicken with a bunch of retards. Okay? And he wants us to be proactive, even though the government is being proactive in trying to get the reassurances. But it seems odd, because it is the one and only time he accepts that the EU won't budge on something, even though he believes he can still change it. What's he going to do? Have an ice cream sandwich fuck with Diane Abbott and Angela Merkel? And maybe that Juncker, Tusk and the other retard. You know, the peanut gallery, essentially. Hold the cameras? It just reminds me of an Oreo, and I don't know why.
As I received, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's letter yesterday, in response to Labour's Brexit plan, it became clearer to me the Prime Minister is merely engaged in the pretence of working across Parliament to find solutions. She has not indicated she will move one iota away from her rejected deal or any of her red lines.
Tell me what the red lines are again, because I don't think you know what they are, since you only think the deal has to stack up to Labour's 6 Brexit tests, which are unattainable if we are leaving. Yeah, he does have to talk shit. You're quite right.
On the backstop, the Prime Minister has pointed out Labour also has concerns. But let's make no mistake about it, that has never been a major issue with the Prime Minister's deal. Indeed, in order to stop the UK falling into the backstop, we need a permanent customs union, and a strong single market deal.
So, staying in the very things we're leaving, and we can't agree to stay in because that would mean staying in the EU, which will go against the vote of the people. Is this being spoken by a Eurosceptic again, or just some retard?
That is the key, Mr. Speaker, to maintaining an open border on the island of Ireland. That is key to...
But I don't give a fuck about the open border. I really don't. At this point, I stand by it. I really don't give a fuck if Ireland and Northern Ireland go back to war over some ideological bullcrap. I don't. there isn't enough people there for me to give a shit. It has become such a boogeyman. Quite frankly, I'd be more than happy, as I've stated, to move Northern Ireland to Scotland, and Scotland to Northern Ireland, and you can keep it. Oh, thank you, Peter. He basically, and his deal is the Norway deal. It's not a deal. It's a kowtowing to the EU, and it doesn't give us any autonomy. And I don't see Norway doing much trade outside the EU, by the way.
Protecting jobs, industry and living standards in this country. That is why it's backed by businesses who employ and trade unions who represent millions of workers in this country. And to correct the Prime Minister's claim in her statement, we want to negotiate a new UK-EU customs union, as I set out in my letter.
44 days.
The Prime Minister says there is no need to negotiate a customs union, as her deal provides for the benefit of being in one.
It did, but it was vague.
I'm afraid, Mr. Speaker, that is simply not the case.
Ooh, are you saying the Prime Minister's a liar? Sounds like heresy.
The deal the Prime Minister negotiated means there will be barriers to trade in goods.
No, her deal actually said that we would maintain standards and that there would be seamless trade as long as Northern Ireland became this kind of third state. It would retain membership to an extent of the EU. So no, you're wrong.
And there will not be frictionless trade, putting manufacturers across the country at a huge disadvantage.
You know what would be an even bigger disadvantage? Agreeing to this deal and, not being able to, trade abroad. Which we wouldn't be able to really with her deal either, to be honest. Her deal is pretty fucking catastrophic.
This is made quite clear in the political declaration, especially when it says, and I quote, "The parties will form separate markets and distinct legal orders," and concedes that, and I quote, "can lead to a spectrum of different outcomes for administrative processes as well as checks and controls." Nothing is secured. The Prime Minister is also trying to win support for her deal by promising to protect workers' rights after Brexit. Well, Mr. Speaker, just look at the record of the party opposite.
That's right, Jeremy.
They attacked trade union rights through the Trade Union Act. They kept this House up all night, opposing the minimum wage in 1997.
I don't give a fuck about 1997. Seriously, that was like 22 years ago. Who the fuck gives a damn about 1997? It was a different time. Who gives a fuck? Seriously.
They're the party that introduced...
Oh, and before he finishes that, this party, the Conservatives, brought the living wage into effect, increased the minimum wage, increased the amount you could earn before paying tax. They raised the tax bar. So come on, you've got to be honest here. You can shit on them for something in 1997. I care about 1984. Fucking hell, yeah.
Employment tribunal fees.
Employment tribunal fees? What the fuck are they? You know what? I should have done research on that because I'm sure it would have been something interesting.
And introduced the public sector pay cap. For men.
Actually, I get that. Because, equality, yo. Do I need to, have a sarcasm sign up for this shit?
Many of them, Mr. Speaker, ripping up rights is what Brexit is all about. Take the Secretary of State for International Trade. He once wrote, "It's too difficult to hire..."
That's a good point, actually, Hashbury Stumble. Tory's living wage is not the real living wage. You're quite right. I do think there is a certain issue with living wage, depending on cost of living in region. And so, for example, what the current living wage is good in some places, certainly further north, or it's not so bad where I live. But if you go a bit, nearer to cities, it doesn't really, it's not even a minimum wage really based on the cost of living.
and fire, too expensive to take on new employees, and went on to say it is intellectually unsustainable to believe that workplace rights should remain untouchable. Yes. That was the Secretary of State for Trade. No wonder trade union leaders like Tim Roach of the GMB, Francis O'Grady, the Secretary of the TUC, have rejected the Prime Minister's inadequate pledges. And it's vital too, Mr. Speaker, that we keep pace with the best consumer safeguards and environmental protections, as if the warnings of the destruction of our biodiverse natural life are not serious enough. We have to be very serious about all environmental protections and indeed make them much stronger. Mr. Speaker, there is a sensible way forward, but the Prime Minister is refusing to listen. Labour's alternative has been widely welcomed as
no, it's Norway deal.
a way of breaking the impasse.
It doesn't break the impasse. It's a new deal, which would mean renegotiating. Donald Tusk said he was okay with it. Yes, autocorrect is your worst enemy. But they've also said they won't reopen the deal, so what's the point?
From business leaders, European leaders, and even from some Conservative MPs.
But I don't give a fuck about what business leaders say. Business leaders are added to the scaremongery of remaining. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter.
But the Prime Minister refuses to listen. Mr. Speaker, I urge all members across this House to think about the damage the Prime Minister's strategy is doing. The threat to industry and skilled jobs and communities all across this country. Now is not the time to stand idly by. Now is the time to stand up and do the right thing, to rule out no deal and back Labour's alternative plan.
Pretty shit, really, wasn't it? Pretty shit. Let's go to the paper fiddler. Right.
Our own trade agreements with those countries. And I think that is the best and most sensible approach as we leave the Union.
Right, so the paper fiddler is about to talk. The reams are in his hands. You're getting angry. Don't get angry, Brick Gamer Girl. He's just a tosser, that's all. Damn, you put some profanity in that chat there, Double N. I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't know how to pronounce the first word, I'm afraid, in your name on stream.me.
45 days from Scotland being dragged out of the European Union.
Kicking and screaming.
45 days from economic catastrophe. She talks about...
Oh, it's economic catastrophe if you're a glass half empty kind of person. I'm a glass half full kind of guy, and I think we have a good chance of being okay. Just, it's worth pointing out. I actually really want to get to the part that matters. So I'm going to skip over all his blithering.
Ultimately, Scotland will have a choice. An independent European nation or remaining part of an inward-looking UK. Scotland's voices must be respected, Prime Minister.
Prime Minister!
I say to the right honourable gentleman, I think that the points that he made are the same points he's been making in response.
Right, so I need you all to listen very carefully to the background noise. Because obviously the Prime Minister is saying something, but you're going to hear something. And bye, Felicia. It's really, really important. Let's
response
continue.
to my statements, regardless of the content of my statements, for some time now. He talked about the economic analysis. We did publish an economic analysis of the proposals that the government had put forward.
Order. There's plenty of...
That wasn't the actual bit that starts shit. This is just a nice teaser, by the way. It's teaser.
Scope for disagreement about what is true and what isn't true, but in fairness, I repeat the point that the person who has the floor must be heard.
The economic analysis, yeah, no. There wasn't one done on the deal. There were ones done on outcomes, not on the deal itself. So actually he is right.
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Now pay close attention, because shit's about to get real. And this you can rub one off to this. It's going to get real good.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that I think in his intervention from a sedentary position, he may have inadvertently misled the House on this matter. No. The government...
Did you hear it? I'm gonna have to go back. I might have to try and go back and get it, because it is really hard to hear. Let's try again.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman that I think in his...
Careful, you've got to be really, pay real close attention.
Intervention from a sedentary position, he may have inadvertently misled the House on this matter. No. The government...
What was that?
He called the Prime Minister a liar. It's why the thumbnail says liar. This is amazing.
Order, forgive me, I didn't hear what was said. I hope the word liar wasn't used, but order, I'm perfectly capable of handling this matter with alacrity, and I shall do so. If that word was used without equivocation or qualification, that word must be withdrawn at once. At once. Order. If a member on the front bench used that word, I'm sorry, I'm not debating it, I'm not arguing, I'm not negotiating. That word must be withdrawn at once. Who was the best?
That's the best bit. Burko didn't see who said it, so now he's had to ask one of his little squires at the front to confirm this.
I'm advised, I admit I didn't see which member used it. I'm advised, I think on good authority, that word was used by the leader of the Scottish National Party. If so, I want the debate to continue, and it will, but if so, I simply ask the right honourable gentleman to withdraw that word. He cannot accuse another member in this House of dishonesty. Withdraw.
In courtesy to yourself, I withdraw. For courtesy to yourself.
I love that, because he's not withdrawn it for the Prime Minister, he's done it solely as a courtesy to the Speaker, and he can do that. That is amazing. I absolutely love him right now, because he's a massive twat, but the balls on the guy, come on. That is next level. I love it. It's fantastic. Actually, really, really funny. There were more points that were made in this, and it was quite interesting, but I just wanted to focus on those three. And I think we're done, to be honest, because, yeah, I have nothing really to add now. I have to get up early, so I'm going to finish now. Thank you all very much for joining me over on Stream Me and here on YouTube. And I hope you'll have a lovely, lovely evening.